Hey everyone, this is Brian. I'm back with my, I guess you could say mid-March, early April opinions on the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book. And there's a lot of things I want to talk about when it comes to the comic book. Now, I just did a review, a special edition review of 198, because honestly, I haven't really gotten the issue in the mail yet, but I have my ways of finding out, of reading it. Those ways that I said are my personal sources, and I think you know what those sources are if you look around the internet and certain video sites and certain photo sites and things like that. So those are the ways I did it, because I've noticed that a lot of people have been doing a lot of reviews of them, and there are certain people that I found out about that they live in, here in the West like I do, sometimes in, the Southwest, the Northwest, and they get the comic book, but they always get it almost like the second to final week of the month. So, but they always do like a review before that because, they find it either at a photo site that a friend tells them about, or they find it on a video site that a friend tells them about, and they read it there. But overall, like I said about 198, it's a very good issue. It's a good lead-in into the next two issues. Especially with the fact that you know that the Iron Queen, Regina, if it's who we think it is making her return possibly or debut next issue with you know to kind of turn the tide in the favor of Snively and Dimitri. And I don't really know what's going to happen, next issue, but I think a lot of everybody's got an idea of what takes place. I mean, I've always questioned myself of who, what effect is this Iron Queen going to play? What role is she going to play? Does she have the power, if you will, to turn other people or Mobians into iron or into stone? Does she have that power? And is that going to last for an issue or an issue and a half? I don't know. But all I know is that I know Ian Flynn. He's got some kind of impact ready to be made with this character. He wouldn't be bringing a character in like this, reintroducing him, just for the heck of it. So who knows what's going to happen? And it'd be kind of surprising. It'd be kind of surprising if Eggman dies in this issue, in his next two issues, or if Eggman, and it's just a thought about it, if Eggman becomes like a sidekick to Regina and Snively. I mean, that would be hilarious. But but I don't know what's really going to happen. All I know is that when you look at a certain cover for that takes place for the issue that takes place after the 200th issue, you kind of get an idea of what's happened. And that's one of the things I like to talk about sometimes. I want to talk about. When you have an anniversary issue, especially with a Sonic the Hedgehog comic book, why in God's name would you post and upload the cover of the issue that takes place after it? Especially when it's got a story arc like this. Why would you do that? You're basically giving away the plot point of what's going to happen. But then again, looks can be deceiving. Looks can be deceiving. And what I mean by that is there have been so many issues out there where the looks have been deceiving. So many issues, so many covers of the issues that looks have been deceiving. Because you don't know what's really going on, right? You don't really know what's going on. And when you read the comic, it's got something different in there. Or it's got a little twist in it in between. I mean, an example I look at for myself is 174. I mean, we had that big old wedding picture, with everybody with a big question mark and everybody being ready for the wedding of Bunny and Antoine. But what did we see at the end of that issue? That's right. We saw Eggman cornering and basically vaporizing and imprisoning SBO into one of the egg grapes. Right. That's what we saw. We didn't see anything else besides that little twist. Yes, the only thing we saw that was mostly showcased was the wedding. And in between we had SBO in New Megalopolis trying to figure out what was going on. That's all we had. But most of the time, it was all light tone until the very end. That was the twist. That was what made the cover deceiving because you never saw any evidence of that on the cover. Right? You never saw any evidence of that. So what makes us think that this cover is any different? Oh, sure, there might be a celebration issue and everything, but what about the end? What about in between? You see, that's why to me you should never, ever, especially with an anniversary issue like 200, your 200th issue, you should never, ever reveal the cover of the issue afterwards. You should make people wait. As cruel as that sounds, you should make fans wait. So they'll be like, oh, I wonder what happens next. I wonder what happens next. You don't do that. You don't do that. Now, and as far as the characters go, one of the things that I've always seen, and as far as the characters go, I mean, you look at this issue 198, and you look at that one little scene after they've kind of won this small battle against Eggman and the Legion. You kind of see a little flirtation, a little friendliness between Sonic and Sally. Now, a lot of people might take that for granted. They might say, oh, God, here we go again. Sonic and Sally, they're going to try to put them together again. Well, that might be true. That might be true, and it may not be true. No one really knows what's going to happen in the next few issues. But it's good to see a little bit of hit there. It's like a friend of mine on my YouTube page has said in her little rant defending that relationship, that right now, even though they're not officially a couple, it's good to see them back as Sunday sweethearts. In other words, it's good seeing them flirting with each other and being friendly and playful and things like that. Now, another thing I want to talk about when it concerns those two as well is that recently, with all the covers of all the upcoming issues being revealed, one of the covers that was revealed was Sonic Universe issue number 5. Now, the reason this was revealed, the reason I want to talk about this and the reason it was revealed is because there's something on there that no one likes. That some people like, but other people don't. And that is none other than Mobius years later. But this time it's not Mobius 25 years later. No, no, no. This time it's Mobius 30 years later. In other words, it takes place 5 years after the events of the previous Mobius Years Later saga that Ian wrote. And this time, things are a little bit more different. In other words, yes, Sonic and Sally are back together as a couple, king and queen, in this issue, obviously. Knuckles is back to being what he is. Lein-Da is up to something. And Lawless Sue on the cover, I guess, 5 years, let's see, she's about what? 15, 14, 15, 16, she's about 21, right? 20, 21 years old here. Is basically reduced to a babysitter on the cover because who's clinging on to her? But the 5-year-old versions, if you will, of Sonya and Manic, in which she's not very happy about because I guess to her, she probably felt as though with things getting back to normal, maybe she can have her friends the way they were. But that's not the case. But the reason I want to talk about that is because not a lot of people are looking forward to this. They're like, I've seen people, type up comments like, I don't want to look, this is not what I look forward to. Not again. Why are they doing this? Well, let me kind of explain something. Even though some people don't like it, it's got enough of a fan base and popularity that fans, that people want to see because it brings a lot of interest. Now, true, it does take place in an alternate timeline, a timeline that's similar to the one that's taking place in the current comic. So who's to say that what was seen in these issues with the Mobius years later aren't just hints of what is going to happen? But, then again, I'm not the one writing them. I'm not the one coming up with the ideas or writing stories for them. But I guess to Ian and the writers and the staff there at Archie Comics, like I said, it kind of brings up a good. I think Mobius years later just has enough popularity in there to keep going. And so far from what I have read from people, Sonic Universe is exactly doing what it should be doing, and that's putting these stories, putting all these stories that would be side stories in a full-length feature kind of like environment, so that you don't get any interruptions or shorten any of the main stories in the original comic. So I think so far it's doing its job, even though it's bringing back a storyline. A lot of people most are looking forward to, and most aren't. But that's all I can really say with my opinions on the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book. That next couple months, all I can say is going to be real interesting, and I look forward to the next couple months. I hope you do too. without any attitudes or anything. And perhaps we'll get something big. Who knows? Maybe we'll get something that we'll be talking about for years. Till next time, though, peace out.